bilaterally the stimulating electrode and a deep structures in the brain. Here is the subthalamic nucleus, which was first used in Parkinson's disease to treat the symptoms. And then when we put bilateral electrodes, we connect them with a cable, as you can see here, to a pacemaker that we put at this level. Then we can deliver the stimulation current permanently 24 hours, 24 hours. And you can see that the people can live with this electrode and the stimulator. Here you can see with MRI the control of the implantation. We have to superimpose electrodes inside the subthalamic nucleus, as you can see here. And go back to the history, how we discovered this deep brain stimulation. And the Parkinson's disease was for the first time described by James Parkinson as with several motor symptoms. Here are the most important: akinesia, rigidity, and tremor. And this pathology is characterized by the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra compacta. And you know that this substantia nigra compacta, which is here in the normal subject, you can see dopaminergic cells here. In Parkinsonian patients, there is no dopaminergic cells, or only few dopaminergic cells are surviving. And here we can see that the dopaminergic cells in the substantia nigra project to the striatum, where you have the release of dopamine, and which will play a very important role in the modulation of the information coming from the cortex to the striatum. And this modulation is very, very important, as it was said by Amadi, because they will modulate all the information coming from the cortex to do a correct function, the execution of a movement or a cognitive function or limbic function. Everything is controlled inside the striatum by the modulation of the dopamine. The first step, which was very, very important in the history of Parkinson's disease, was the discovery of L-DOPA. You know that dopamine cannot go through the hematoencephalic barrier, and Arvid Carlson, with his work on dopamine, got the Nobel Prize in 2000, and he proposed to use L-DOPA in the rabbits. Here you can see the rabbits with the reserpine injection. They are totally unable to move, and when he gave them L-DOPA, you can see the rabbits are running. And this was the first, really the first discovery of L-DOPA to use in Parkinson's disease. Then he proposed to test and to start treating the Parkinsonian patients with L-DOPA. The problem is of L-DOPA is with the short term, during the 4 to 5, 6 years in the beginning of the disease, L-DOPA works very, very well, very efficient for the cardiomotor symptoms. We can improve akinesia, rigidity, and also tremor. But with the long-term treatment, we have a lot of complications. You can see the fluctuations of the therapeutic effects and also the induction of abnormal involuntary movements that we name dyskinesia. And these are very, very problematic for the patients because they cannot have a good quality of life, they cannot move correctly, they cannot work, they cannot drive, they can do anything. And this is very, very important. And to avoid this problem, the limit of the DOPA therapy, it was important to do some research to try to understand the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease to propose a new therapeutic approach. And for that, to understand the pathophysiology, it was important to develop animal models. Tomorrow we will talk a lot about animal models, but today I will show you only 2 animal models which were very, very important in the understanding of the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease and the discovery of deep brain stimulation. We have rodents and also the non-human primates. In my lab, we have a capacity of around 60 monkeys that we can use in our institute. And these animal models, the rodents and the monkeys, were very important for the understanding of the network in the physiological conditions and also in the pathological Parkinsonian conditions. And here you can see the unilateral model in the rats by the injection of 6-hydroxydopamine inside the mid-forebrain bender. You can see that we can degenerate dopaminergic cells in the substantia nigra, and we have a degeneration also of the fibers in the striatum. And we can control by immunohistochemistry here, as this is a unilateral model, we are injecting only in one side. You can see here the normal striatum, anterior, intermediate, and the posterior part, that we have normal tyrosine hydroxylase, and in the side with the lesion, we have no fibers in the striatum. And in the substantia nigra, we can see also here the normal side, control side, here the lesion side. We have a lesion around 90 to 95% of the cell bodies of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra. You can see here the magnification. Some VTA neurons are resistant to the lesion, and we know that in Parkinsonian patients also we have some VTA neurons which are surviving. Let's look now to the primate model of Parkinson's disease. The monkeys become Parkinsonian by a repeated injection of MPTP, intravenously or intramuscularly. And we can see that the repetition of the injections of MPTP will develop the symptoms around 14 days after the beginning of the injections. Then we can see the evolution. Even if we stop the injections of MPTP, we can see the evolution to arrive to the last or the most severe stage of the disease in the monkeys, which are totally similar to the late stage of Parkinsonian patients. And in this model, if we cut the brains, we can see here at day 0 we have staining in the caudate and the putamen or tyrosine hydroxylase, and we can see the evolution of the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons. And at D5, you can see that we have no dopaminergic fibers in the caudate and the putamen. And we can see here the degeneration, the progressive degeneration of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra. We can see that the red color is really only with the few cell bodies here compared to the D0. We have a progressive degeneration of around 90% of the dopaminergic cells in the substantia nigra. This is why the monkeys are very severely Parkinsonian. And we have to pay attention to their lives because we can lose them very quickly. We have really to pay attention to the monkeys. And in these models, many research works were done to understand all these pathways and the connections between the different basal ganglia and outside basal ganglia nuclei. And the principle is that you can see here the location of basal ganglia. It was very nicely demonstrated by Amadi. And the location here in the network, this is a model of the network. And you can see here the basal ganglia receiving the information from different areas of the cortex. And the basal ganglia, when the information coming from the cortex is finalized, you have this projection to the thalamus, then the thalamus projects to the cortex. This is in the normal situation. And we can see that, as said by Amadi, we have 3 parallel models, one with the sensory motor functions, the other one for the cognitive and associative circuit, and the limbic circuit. They are all involving the same nuclei, but different parts of each nuclei. Okay? When we are speaking about the sensory motor function, it's always the dorsal and the lateral part of the nuclei, with the cognitive in the medial, and for the limbic areas are the ventral parts of each nucleus. And these are very important because deep brain stimulation was discovered in Parkinson's disease because we are stimulating the sensory motor part of the nucleus. But now we know that we can treat other psychiatric and limbic problems with deep brain stimulation if we implant in the corresponding area. we have time, we can speak about this. Then we can see here in this network, the information is coming from the cortex to the basal ganglia with the striatum, the caudate, and the putamen considered as the input structures of the basal ganglia. Then we have the output structure of the basal ganglia. And we know down that we have this direct and indirect pathway. And when we have the balance between these two direct and indirect pathway, we have a normal physiological motor action. But if we have an imbalance, we will have the symptoms. And this is what happened in Parkinsonian patients or in Parkinsonian models. If we have no dopaminergic cells in the substantia nigra, there is no regulation of the information in the striatum. We have an imbalance between these two pathways, and the resultant here is an hyperactivity in the subthalamic nucleus and in the output structures of the basal ganglia. And then we have an hyperactivity and the neighbor inhibition on the thalamus. Then the thalamus, when it is inhibited, we have an alleviation of the excitatory action on the cortex. This is why the patients have akinesia. What is very important in Parkinsonian condition is the change in the firing patterns of the neuronal activity in the basal ganglia. If we look to the normal condition here, in all the structures of the basal ganglia, if we record the neuronal activity, you can see this regular pattern of discharge in the GPE, in the subthalamic nucleus, and also in the output structures of the basal ganglia. All the time we have this tonic regular activity. However, if we have a degeneration of dopaminergic neurons, there is no regulation inside the striatum, and all these structures are discharging with bursty activity instead of the regular tonic activity. You can see this bursty activity in the lobus pallidus externus, in the subthalamic nucleus also, and also in the output structures of the basal ganglia. And the bursty activity is really the signature, the pathological signature of Parkinson's disease. If you record the subthalamic nucleus neuronal activity, for example, in animal models or in the patients, I will show you this, you will see all the time bursty activity instead of the regular tonic activity. And this is why we have this pathological signature of the pathology. And if we record in the rat's normal situation, we have this regular activity. In 6-hydroxydopamine rats model, we have the bursty activity in subthalamic nucleus. In MPTP monkeys, we can find this bursty activity instead of the tonic normal activity. And in the patients, we have the chance to record the neuronal activity during surgery. And we can see that all STM's neurons have this bursty activity. And in patients with tremor, we can see an oscillatory activity here with the burst, which is totally synchronous to the tremor manifested by the patient. We have all the time this synchronization. And I will show you an example with a video with the recordings. And what happened in the 90s? There's two teams who proposed to lesion the subthalamic nucleus, to do an ablation of the subthalamic nucleus because of its hyperactivity, because there is a pathological recording or activity inside the subthalamic nucleus. And Hagai Bergman in the team of Malon Belong and also Aziz Tipo in England, they proposed to lesion the subthalamic nucleus and to see if we can have an improvement in the motor symptoms or not. This is what they did. And they observed an improvement of the motor symptoms for all the symptoms, akinesia, rigidity, and also tremor. This was done in the African green monkey. And the problem was the manifestation of abnormal movements like the movements that we are inducing by endocrine, this kind of dyskinesia. The lesion of the subthalamic nucleus improved the symptoms, but with an exaggeration. This is why the monkeys started to dance and to have these abnormal movements. This is why it was not possible to propose to the patient this ablation of the subthalamic nucleus. And the lesion is irreversible if you are not inside the subthalamic nucleus and you lesion another part of the brain. This is why this approach was not proposed to the patients in the beginning. And our question was, can we replace the lesions by the deep brain stimulation, implanting the electrode inside the subthalamic nucleus in our monkeys, in PTP monkeys, and see what happens if we can have a good result from it. This is what we did. And we can see here is an example of tremor. This is the tremor in PTP monkeys that we are recording by the detection of the movements. And when we start the high frequency stimulation of the subthalamic nucleus, we can see that we stop totally the tremor in our monkeys. And when we stop the stimulation, the tremor is coming back few seconds later. And this will show that we are really improving the tremor in our PTP monkeys. And this is rested tremor that we can improve, which is typical of Parkinson's disease. If we look to rigidity, we can record the muscle tone in the biceps and the triceps, and we can see that in the normal situation we have this low level because there is no contraction of the muscle. However, with rigidity, the muscle is really contracted, and we can see this increase in the amplitude of the muscle tone. And when we start the stimulation, we are normalizing totally the muscle tone. It means that we are improving rigidity at the same time. Then we propose to switch and to try to implant the electrode in the patients. It was done in the 90s, and we proposed this implantation with alinidine, Grenoble, and Chiapolac. And we observed a very, very important and dramatic improvements in the motor symptoms. And to have a successful implantation of the electrodes into the subthalamic nucleus, as you can see here, we have the subthalamic nucleus, which is very, very small and very deep, as you can see it in MRI. You can see it here also. It's really very, very small. We can use MRI to control anatomically the location, but you know that we have a distortion in MRI images, and we have an error in targeting the nuclei in the brain. This is why we prefer to propose to do exactly the same approach with electrophysiology to record during the descent of the electrode to see exactly this pathological bursty activity. If we detect this bursty activity, we will implant the electrode at this place because we are sure that we have this pathological activity. It means that we are inside the subthalamic nucleus. And this approach came from animal studies, not from human studies. And we can see here a very good example of the descent of 5 electrodes. But here we can see only 1 electrode, which is really a good example to see that we have this bursty activity in the subthalamic nucleus. The advantage that we have with the subthalamic nucleus is we have in the upper part of the subthalamic nucleus we have the zona incerta. There is no cell bodies, only fibers. We record nothing. This is why we have a very low background noise. And when the tip of the electrode is entering the subthalamic nucleus, as we have cell bodies, we have an increase in the background noise. And when we are near to a subthalamic neuron, we are recording this bursty activity. And this is really very important for the localization. This is a functional localization of the subthalamic nucleus. Then when we go outside the subthalamic nucleus, you can see a decrease in the background noise. Then we enter the substantia nigra reticulata. And we know here that the subthalamic nucleus starts here and finish here. It means that we can put the electrode at this level and we will have good results. Here, an example of recordings in a patient. We can have the sound. I think we can have it from my calculator. Do you hear? This is a patient during surgery. And we can see the bursty activity on the screen, which is totally synchronous to the tremor.
Et la cellule continue à décharger, mais pas de façon, pas tellement de façon embouffée. Et regarde, on a une activation avec le poignet. Regarde. the response to the motor movement. La réponse cellulaire, c'est ça. Elle est activée par ça. C'est pas par
It means that we are really in the sensory motor part of the nucleus. This is why we hear the response of the neurons to the movement. And now you can see the synchronization with the tremor. And with this, we are sure that our electrode, this electrode, is really inside the supraatomic nucleus. Then, when we have double, when we finish recordings, we try to do some test of stimulation to see if we can stop the tremor in that. Here is this strong tremor in the patient's tremor. We start the stimulation, you can see that the tremor stops. Then we will stop the stimulation, and we have this tremor coming down. Start the stimulation, we stop the tremor. We can see here also. Every time we start the stimulation, we stop the tremor. Then we stop the stimulation, the tremor is coming back. It's really very, very reversible. It takes a few seconds after stopping the stimulation to have this tremor coming back. Then we try to look to the side effects induced by the stimulation by increasing the intensity of the stimulation, because we know that Parkinson's disease is a progressive and evolutive disease, and we know that when we will implant electrode, the symptoms will be more severe with time because of the evolution of the degeneration of the cells and also the evolution of the severity of the symptoms. This is why we try to find a place where we have a very low intensity of the stimulation inducing positive effect in improvement of the symptoms with high level of the stimulation parameters giving the side effect. Because we will need in the future to increase the intensity of the stimulation with the severity of the disease. And finally, you can see that I showed you the electrodes in the supraatomic nucleus of the stimulator. Here we have an example of a patient that we operated in Bordeaux. He has very, very severe wrist tremor with akinesia and rigidity. This was before surgery. He didn't take any medication, nothing. He is like this without medication. And with the medications, he has a lot of dyskinesia. We can stop his tremor, but he has a lot of dyskinesia. This is why he accepted to be operated for the electrodes. Here, after surgery, there is no tremor, nothing. He has 100% improvement of his tremor. And we will ask him to do some movement to see also for akinesia if it works or not. We can see that we stop totally his tremor. Now we will ask him to do the movement. He is doing the movement totally normally. Now we ask him to do some movement of his hand, fingers. You can see the akinesia. He has a lot of difficulties to move with his fingers. He is very, very disabled with this tremor. He is tremoring all the time. Now we are asking him to do this kind of movements. He is unable to do it. And here with the stimulation, you can see the movements, the rapidity of his movements. And you can see the precision in the movement with the stimulation. He is really improved very, very well. And then we ask him to stand up. You see that he is very late. And it takes a lot of time to stand up. Then we are asking him to move at left. He did it by steps. Here we will ask him to do the same. And he is normally moving. And the last part will be to show you that it works very well on walking also. You see that he is walking with the very small steps. This is typical to Parkinson patients. And you will see with the stimulation he is walking totally normally. Okay. Now you know that Parkinson's disease is not limited to only elder people. We can have some genetic forms from Parkinson's disease in young people. And here we have an American patient, very young. She has the electrodes in the brain. And she can control by herself the stimulator, as you will see. Now she is stimulated. It just shows that the stimulator is on. Then she will stop the stimulation and you will see the transformation. Now she is stopping the stimulator. She is totally Parkinson with very severe state of Parkinson disease, as you can see. She is unable to speak or to walk or to move. Now she will restart her stimulator on. And it takes really few seconds and she is totally improved. Okay. I don't know. I don't understand why I have this music. Sorry. Here, just to show you that after the successful results in medications, now different stimulation is used in all the world, and I'm really very happy for that. And in 2007, I had the honor to introduce different stimulation in Morocco, in the university hospitals of Morocco, because I met this neurosurgeon who came to Bordeaux for 2 years, and he learned how he can implant the electrode, and I started with him the implantations in Casablanca in 2007. Then, when it was successful in Casablanca, we started also in Rabat, in Fes, in Marrakesh, and in Lisbon. And I said that why not in the other countries in Africa? I hope that we will do it in Africa. Because in Morocco it works very well. Now we have the insurance is paying for the stimulator and for surgeries. And I think that in the other countries of Africa also we can do this experience. Here is a Moroccan patient in Marrakesh who was really suffering from a very severe Parkinsonian symptoms. And here after surgery, you can see that he is working normally, he is totally improved. And then I asked him to do some movements just to verify that everything is working very well. And you can see that he is able now to do the normal movements without any tremor. Okay. To finish, just to tell you that research is not made by only one person, it's a work of a group. And I really thank very much my supervisor for doing my PhD, Bernard Dulac, Christian Gross, then the experience in the patients with Annie-Louis Benavid and Pierre Pollack, and then in my group, all the people working with me in Bordeaux and the financial support from different organizations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Very exciting presentation. Just a question: what fears are there at the time of installation of the electric fears on damage to whatever surrounding structures there may be? And then two, any negative results?
Thank you for this question. Very, very important question. The first one is, in the beginning, we all the time had the risk to have hemorrhage. Because putting something in the electrode, this is the first problem. But now with technology and evolution of the electric implant, we can see the muscles and we can choose a trajectory without any touch of the muscles. And this is very, very important. In the beginning, we had the risk of
Thank you very much for that very elegant talk. Are there any stereotaxic coordinates that one would use in case you don't have the guiding system with MRI? And then the second question is, what are the cost implications, because that would be prohibitive in very many sub-Saharan countries?
A very good question for developed countries, because when we started to do this kind of surgeries, we didn't have MRI. at the time, in the 90s. MRI was developed later to see exactly this structure. We had MRI, but it was not possible to see small nucleus like the subthalamic nucleus. Now we can see it very, very goodly and precisely, but we have the problem of distortion of MRI, and at the same time we have the inter-individual errors of the location of the nuclei in the brain. What I propose to countries without MRI is to do ventriculography. You inject a contrast product in the ventricle, then you can see with X-ray the form of the ventricles, and you have the anterior and the posterior commissure. You calculate it, and the subthalamic nucleus is in the middle. And we can target it with the micro-recordings functionally to see exactly the part inside of that. But we did ventriculography works very well because all the patients that we did in the beginning were without MRI, only with ventriculography. It's a really good thing. The cost is a little bit expensive. It's around $25,000. But in all the countries, the insurance can reimburse the cost. Even in Morocco, we try to convince the government to have this protection for the patient, and they are paying 80% of the cost. I hope that it will be the case in other countries when we will start. Is permanent. We change only the pacemaker because it's a battery. The duration of the battery in the beginning was 4 to 6 years. Now we have a rechargeable, stimulator, and the warranty is 15 years for the equipment from Medtronic and 25 years for the Boston system. We have two systems. Now we can have 15 to 25 years of warranty of the stimulation. Then we can just move the stimulator and put another one. We don't touch to the electrodes.
Thank you for calling. Question? Abdulhamid is here. Just want to catch up with a colleague.